See, proof that I have teenage kids because I actually caught that reference. Okay, and I don't think you meant Simon and
I need a
Garfunkel.
paper towel and a wet rag thing. I have pen on my pants.
How'd you do that? Well, that'll do it every time. Now she did it again. She's like, I did it like this. Oh, look, there's another spot. Boop, boop, ba-doo. Go to the sink. There's a wet rag on the sink. You can use that.
Use the dentist tool that they put in between your teeth.
I would do that because
I'm so impressed you haven't bitten that. That's like the ultimate temptation is to want to bite it all the time. But you're doing so well. Okay.
I've been into a Kit Kat without breaking it off.
Oh,
So there are 3 gospels that are very similar: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay.
Why?
They're structured the same way. And in fact, Matthew and Luke all quote sections of Mark, word for word. So that means they knew Mark's gospel and copied parts of it. Okay? So what's really interesting, remember I said 10 to 40% you would change on any given time you write it? So 10 to 40% is exactly the amount of details that are different between the different gospels. If they tell the same story, like one gospel names somebody and one person just says a woman. That's a detail change.
Wayman. Wayman.
What is that?
Wayman.
Well, it's probably a permanent pen. Your mom will have to see if she can get it out with this like detergent when you get home.
Fine.
It'll be fine. I didn't really notice if you hadn't pointed it out. Okay. So Craig Blomberg is a really good professor of ancient languages and stuff. And here's what he writes. He says, the disciples and other Christians had committed to memory a lot of what Jesus said and did, but they felt free to recount the information in different forms, always preserving the significance of Jesus' teachings and deeds. And that's exactly what we see in the 4 Gospels. So isn't it like the telephone game? No, because the self-correcting ruins the game. If we play the telephone game later, and let's say there's 12 of us here decorating the tree, and we get to the end, and it's exactly the same as it started, is the game much fun? No, you don't want to play again. You're like, okay, that was stupid. Why did we do that? Okay, so the point of the telephone game is to make mistakes, because that's what makes it fun.
So if I purposely make a mistake, it'll still
be what?
It'll still be fun.
It could be. It depends on how it comes out at the end. Yeah, you don't want to try and purposely change it because then that kind of ruins the game too. All right, so here's the next test. We've done intention, we've done ability, consistency. What do you think consistency test means? What are you looking for?
Something that they consistently say or something.
Mm-hmm. More detail. What are you looking for?
Are they like constantly mentioning something or going back to a certain topic?
Okay, that's exactly. Yep, you're on the right track. Go ahead.
Or changing the subject or like saying something and then changing their answer.
Yes. How are they changing their answer every time? Do they keep going back? Oh, well, no, I didn't remember that time right, and blah, 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 blah. That's one of the things. What if you have more than one witness?
They all change it. If they have different stories?
Yes. Do they have different? And because we do. How many witnesses? How many witnesses to the resurrection do we have in the New Testament?
5.
Getting close. She's closer than a lot.
3, 6.
Well, you can let's name off our. We've got Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Right, those are our Gospels.
7.
John is one of them. James.
And then
Thomas.
Who is the first? Who's they call? We don't have Mary didn't write, so we don't have any of her writings. She probably talked to Luke though. That's where Luke got a lot of his stories. How about Peter? That's the other one. Yeah. So we have about 6 of them who wrote in here, and then we have a guy. Paul mentions about 500 of them who he knew that you could go talk to. So if you were in the first century, if you were like say in the year 80 AD, maybe just go a little earlier. Let's say 70 AD, closer about 30 years after Jesus was raised from the dead. So 65, 70, something like that. If you met St. Paul, he could say, "Oh, there's about 500 people down in Jerusalem. You can go talk to them. They all saw Jesus raised from the dead." Not one person, not 2 people. You could go talk to about 500 people who had interacted with Jesus after he rose from the dead. Okay? Now, none of them wrote books that we have a copy of, but Paul knew all of them. And he could say to somebody, if you want to talk to anybody, just go down there. They're fine. There's lots of them. Okay? Wasn't hard at all. So here's one of the things that's interesting. Consistency test is one of the things I really had to learn about when I was learning this material. There are differences between the Bible, different books of the Gospels, right? I told you about that. There are variations. These are the technical terms that people who study ancient books use to explain that. So paraphrase, abridgment, explanatory addition, selection, omission. You guys can look all those words up if you really, really want to. But paraphrase is something like, what would paraphrase mean? Being closer?
To like summarize.
Yes. To use like similar, but tell the same basic story, but use different words, right? Okay. Abridgment means taking a long story, making it shorter. Additions means, hey, they're not going to understand what I just wrote if I don't put an explanation in, huh?
Additions is math.
Yes, it's like math, but it's verbal. So I'll give you a perfect example. There's a lot of things in the Gospel of Matthew that Luke includes too, but Luke has to explain them, and here's why. Matthew's Gospel was written for a Jewish group of Christians, so he didn't have to explain what Jews do. Luke's Gospel was written for Gentile Christians, non-Jews. So whenever he talks about something that Jews do, he has to explain it so that the non-Jews can understand. So that's an explanatory addition. And then selection, meaning you pick certain ones, you pick some others. Like, have you guys ever heard, any of you ever seen the story of Flibber Lou from VeggieTales?
No.
You're missing quality entertainment.
No, I always watch VeggieTales, so probably I just don't.
We're going home to watch St. Nicholas today because tomorrow's St. Nicholas Day.
My
Yes.
my personal favorite is Jonas.
Oh, the Big Jonah movie, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what my favorite is.
Well, Flibber Lou's kind of one of their short ones, but it's based on a parable called the Good Samaritan,
Is it like the tiny one?
where they throw the pots at each other. Yeah, yeah.
On their head.
What?
I think I watched it. Is it like this bean?
Yes. Yeah, we showed it in VBS 2 or 3 summers ago. We showed it in VBS. What's that?
Is there like a bean and a bunch of beans?
Yeah,
There's
like he saves one that gets beat up, and yeah,
He
and,
sits on the side of the
How dare
road.
they?
It's like,
yeah, he's damaged. Yeah, he's hurt on the side of the road. Yep,
Like this big mountain.
yep.
Oh yeah, I watched that.
Oh yeah,
I have
two
two
cities
cities are up on mountains.
And they throw pots and pans at each other. Yeah, or one throws pots and one throws something else. Shoes. That's what it was. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I think I watched that one.
I think the pot is gonna hurt more.
Yeah. So anyway, that whole VeggieTale is based on a story called the Parable of the Good Samaritan. It's a story Jesus tells. He only tells it in one of the 4 Gospels. Luke is the only one who included that story. But doesn't mean that he didn't tell it, just means that one thought it was important to tell and the other ones didn't. Okay. And then omission, meaning just they also leave some things out. Like the Last Supper that we used every time I stand up at communion and I say, "In the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread and broke it and gave thanks," and all that stuff, right? When I say that none of that is in the Gospel of John. Quite literally none of it. But what's in the Gospel of John is the prayer Jesus said at the Last Supper, and that's not in the other 4 Gospels. Okay? But here's the part I didn't understand. When I first started learning this stuff 25 years ago, if in a court of law, if you've got 4 witnesses and they all tell the exact same story, do you know what that means?
It's true. It's fake.
It means they got together and said, "We'll tell the story this way." It's none of it, unless you have a perfectly photographic memory, which only a very tiny percentage of the population does. You're always going to make mistakes when you remember things. And they actually have a science to know how many, like what percentage of mistakes the average person makes. And there should be, amongst a group of witnesses, there should be differences.
500 billion.
Not quite. But it's a percentage. So it's not an actual number.
1,000%.
No, more like between 20 and 30% of the details you'll make a mistake on.
I can remember my 3rd birthday in exact detail.
Cool.
I can remember my.
What color shirt was your mom wearing?
I think blue. One of her favorite one of her favorite glasses at the time.
So the example here would be, let's say that your sister Hannah was at your birthday, I assume. What if she remembered your mom wearing green? Would that mean you hadn't had a birthday?
No.
Right, exactly. It just means that you don't remember the details the same way. It doesn't this if you both are saying that she had a birthday and your sister says mom wore green and you say she wore blue, it doesn't mean you didn't have a birthday. It just means you didn't get the detail the same. Okay, so actually sometimes if people's witnesses, if the witnesses say too much the same thing in a court of law, the main lawyer will point that out and say, don't listen to their testimonies. They're obviously lying. They obviously got together. Okay.
We should try.
Did they find the weapon?
Hmm?
Did they find the weapon?
We should do this. Like
It's
we
cool.
have
In the Gospels, it was a cross. It was pretty easy to find. It was pretty big.
you pick something like somebody,
Well-
and then we do like this whole thing.
Well, I mean, is that
See if
cross?
we're lying
That's
and
nature.
Oh yeah, we play a game like that. We play that in youth group.
Well, I mean,
Oh, we
is
should
that,
do that.
We will.
Is that cross?
You gotta come to youth group. We will. We do all those games. We have fun with that stuff. Huh?
When are we gonna do that?
When it fits the discussion of the night, we fits the fin. Get up. You're not that tired.
We should do it tonight.
So again, no, tonight we're decorating the Christmas tree.
After, if you have time.
We'll see.
I
It's a long game. It's a fun game.
I have
Yeah.
2 hour delay, so
Yeah.
What?
Oh my god, I just remembered that. Let's go.
I get to sleep until 7.
What do you have a 2-hour delay for?
I sleep until 8.
You can sleep until 8. My bus comes around.
That's crazy.
My bus comes at
Okay,
9:20.
So Simon Greenleaf was the head of the law school. Okay. Listen. Simon Greenleaf was the head of the law school at Harvard, one of the best schools in the United States. He actually set out to disprove Christianity as a lawyer, but he became a Christian because the evidence was so strong. He came to believe he had to become a Christian, that the evidence was so strong. And here's what he wrote. He said, there's enough of a discrepancy, that means a difference, to show that there could have been no previous concert among them. It means they did not get together and coordinate their stories. And at the same time, there is so much agreement, such substantial agreement, as to show they were all independent narrators of the same great transaction. Okay?
So Harvard's
Yeah.
Means they were all, if you ever were to go to Harvard, which is in Massachusetts, if you ever walk on campus, the Greenleaf building is where the law school is found. The building is named
I'm
after
not
him.
going there, so I don't need to worry about that.
Oh, I'm going to Michigan.
I'm going to Pennsylvania.
U of M or EMU or MSU?
Huh?
Which
I'm
there's
going
like
to
four
Penn State.
four
I
big
don't know
state
where-
schools in Michigan.
I was at Penn State.
jobs
So
I wanna do.
I don't know. And they're 2 different majors that won't be at the same school, so.
Yeah, you have to figure out which one you want to go with first, right?
I want to go to
Yeah,
Penn
well, that's
State.
some of that, but-
That's where I wanted to go, but they don't have an architecture school there.
Yeah, they do.
I want to go.
I want it to
go
be
for nuclear
so
physics.
basically I want a double major
Mm.
in so for veterinary school I'd have to get a degree in biology first and then I'd go to veterinary school.
Mhm.
But they have one at Penn State, so I would want to go there. But then for architecture I can't double major for both of them.
Wait,
you're
In Penn State.
Yeah, those are both really, really hard majors, though.
Yeah.
You'd probably have to do one then the other. It'd be really hard to double major. Because I have a friend who's actually, she's one of the top architects in the country. She gets to go places and be guest lecturer and stuff like that. She was she's one of my youth group kids back in the 90s. But it's like 5 years to get your degree in architecture, and then there are so many tests just to get your bachelor's degree to move on
Yeah.
beyond that. So,
I'm glad I don't want to do that.
and then
Absolutely.
veterinary is really hard to get into. Veterinary, best school in the state is University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. For that.
Yep.
What's kind of scary about going into nuclear physics is the fact that you might, if you make a wrong calculation, might be possible because I'm awful at math, you could possibly kill thousands of people.
Yeah, if you're awful at math, nuclear physics is probably not the best
aunt
place for
was
you
a
to go
science
because you're going to spend all day
teacher.
doing math, so you'll hate your job.
Yeah, nuclear something.
Yeah,
I could get
but you can do it at Penn State. They've got a reactor on campus.
I just realized I could get so much help with my science because my aunt was a scientist.
There you go.
That's cool. I can get help. I don't.
Okay, so consistency tests. You want there to be a lot of overlap, but you don't want them to be identical. That's how you judge your witness, to see whether the witness is a true witness. Okay? Bias test. So what do you oops, what happened here? Oh, geez. Something happened.
Oh no, what did happen?
It skipped a bunch of pages. So, bias test. What do you think the bias test means?
Well, bias means to be on one side of something.
Yeah.
So, is it one-sided?
Is it so one-sided they can't tell the truth?
Yeah.
Right? So I just had this morning a little old lady come to me and say, "Would you pray for my grandson? I know he didn't do anything wrong, but he might be in trouble with the law." Well, you actually don't know he didn't do anything wrong. You weren't with him all the time. I understand as a grandma you want to believe that, but you know.
So you mean like a little old lady that's really small?
Well, I mean, yeah, actually she is pretty small.
Oh. So
Yep.
you weren't being like
Shorter than Katie is.
in a movie?
Kind
Little
of.
old lady went to a movie.
Don't, Katie, little
Sometimes.
for you is like 3'7".
Yeah. My grandma's 4'8". My great grandma. At least I'm taller than CJ.
Good point.
All right. So there's the bias test. So you're asking, yeah. Here's what you want to. If you are applying this to the Gospels, you're like, look, these people love Jesus. They're not neutral observers, right? This isn't like a scientist who doesn't care how it turns out, and even science isn't like that. What you have here are people who love Jesus. They weren't necessarily neutral observers, but can you tell the truth about somebody you love?
No.
Of course you can.
Oh.
My spiritual director, this was back about 15 years ago. They were screaming on Penn State's campus, actually, because his church is right near Penn State. They were saying, "Oh, well, they're looking into our emails. They can do whatever." And he said to his father, he said, "Well, do you want the university to be able to read my emails?" Or did you want to get email? Did you want the university to be able to accuse me of being a terrorist? This is back just after 9/11. And he said, if it's true, I do. Said, if it's not true, I'll fight them to the ends of the earth. If it's true, I'll be the first one to lock your butt in jail.
I mean, fair enough.
Yeah. So you can tell the truth about someone you love. And in fact, you can love and respect someone so much that you wish to record their life with great integrity. Okay. And the disciples never really had anything to gain by misrepresenting Jesus. Okay? What happened to the early disciples? There were 12 disciples.
They died.
How?
Two died.
They got killed.
They died how? 10 of them died how?
They got beheaded.
Some of them got beheaded.
They got killed because they're Christian. Yeah.
That's right.
They got hung upside down.
The wall.
Yep. You got it. Yep. So 10 of the word is martyr. Okay. The word martyr means witness. It's Greek for witness, but it means somebody who dies rather than give up their story. So 10 of them die that way. John dies as an old man, and Judas commits suicide because he was so upset with himself for betraying Jesus. Okay. He gave 30 pieces of silver to they paid him 30 pieces of silver in order so he would tell them where Jesus.
Like he could have like gotten like a normal like
job. Went to K Jewelers and just got some.
Silver was just the kind of money they had at the time. There were brass coins and stone coins and copper coins or bronze coins, not brass, but bronze, huh?
Like how did he die though?
He hung himself.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he became one of the other people that hung.
I think
he did it to himself.
I think speared to the wall is probably the worst.
Yeah, that was Thomas. He was speared to the wall. Although being crucified upside down is a bad way to go too. That's how Peter died.
I mean all the blood goes in your head.
And St. Andrew, who we just celebrated his saint day. By the way, you guys should know this just because if you see a saint's day comes up in church, if you we light a candle, it says, "Oh, it's St. Andrew Day." That was November 30th, so it was last Tuesday. The saint's day is always on the day they die. Quite literally. Because, well, why? Why would you celebrate the day somebody dies?
They
They go to heaven. 'Cause they're
Yeah, it's the day they're in heaven, right? In fact, in the early church, they called
they're
it.
not here anymore, and they can't, and they don't have to deal with us anymore.
Well, not so much us, but they don't have to deal with sin, death, and the devil. Yeah. Hopefully, they want to deal with their friends who are Christians, but hang out with us. But, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that happened. So basically, the disciples didn't have anything to gain by the story. Okay, so there you go. So there's no reason for them to tell untruths about Jesus, because the only thing happening is they're getting tortured, they're criticized, they're called idiots. In fact, the earliest piece of Christian art we have, art about Christians, is a political cartoon where one slave is making fun of another slave because he's a Christian. He's like, I may be a slave, but I'm not one of those stupid people like who's a Christian. I can show you a picture of it. We actually have it. It's a political cartoon from the 1st century. Yeah, cartoon. Literally scrawled on the wall. It was in the slaves' quarters. The slave scratched a picture in the wall. He must have really hated the other slave. Okay.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm not.
Go ahead.
My notes are so.
All right.
The Emily kid who makes a pretty little headline for like World War II or the Holocaust or something.
Okay.
Oh, like
Next test. Next test is the cover-up test. Cover-up test. What do you think the cover-up test is?
to cover up for the person's being accused.
To cover up the evidence.
Yes, exactly. Are they covering up things, especially things that make them look bad? So let's say that you've got a witness who's on the stand. There's a
I killed my husband. Let's just go with that again.
Go with that one again. Okay, I was gonna give it to a mob boss. Well, let's say there's a mob boss.
Fat Tony from The Simpsons.
I don't know that character, but that's fine. What's his name?
Fat Tony.
Fat Tony. Okay, so Fat Tony is the mob boss, right? Avery.
What about me?
Welcome.
What about me?
What about you?
I would be the mob boss. Yes,
You be the mob boss? All right, Katie's the mob boss. Katie's the mob boss. And what's happening, let's say, since you haven't had a part yet, Juliana. And Juliana, so I called you your mom's name. I apologize. Juliana, you haven't had a part yet. So you were the gopher for the mob boss. You were dropped. So the mob boss sent on the night in question. You're being asked to tell a story about the night in which the murder happened. The night in question, you were asked to drop off 2 kilos of cocaine at a certain bar.
What the?
So you, in telling the story about what happened that night, you just leave out that little detail. You don't tell a lie. You don't say I didn't do it. But you just like, and then I went to Fat Tony's bar, and I just went in for a beer, and then I went to the next place. Okay. Now you're not saying you didn't tell a lie in court, but you just left out a little detail that made you look bad because you don't really want to go to jail. Okay.
Fat Tony would have been messed up anyway.
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
but Fat Tony doesn't want to tell that this guy dropped off 2 kilos either, because he's counting on Katie here is counting on Juliana's testimony to get her off, so she doesn't want to make Juliana look bad. Okay? So here's the question you ask. Were details glossed over that were hard to explain or made the storyteller look bad? That's what you're looking for in the testimony. Okay? Katie, you're getting this 2 years ahead. You'll have this in 2 years. You'll get this in 2 years.
Yeah, man, come on. I'm going to a restaurant to have some meatballs.
There you go. So the Gospels, here's one of the things you guys should know. When you read the 4 Gospels, all of them have stories that make the disciples look like complete doofuses, especially Peter. Peter is my favorite disciple because he is a complete idiot. And he becomes the head disciple. He makes every possible mistake. It's ridiculous. St. Paul went around holding people's coats while they stoned Christians to death before he became St. Paul, before he became a Jesus follower. Okay, so all those details are included. Details that make the disciples look really bad are included in the Gospels. Meaning, they wrote down these stories and they even included the bad stuff they did. They were trying to make it clear that we're going to tell the whole truth, even if it makes us look terrible. Okay. Jesus had a lot of hard sayings. That would have been easier to leave those sayings out of the Gospels, okay? It'd been a lot easier if they just wanted to make Jesus followers, leave out the hard stuff Jesus said, and more people want to be a Jesus follower. So here's the things that Jesus said. He said things like this: be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect. Oh, that's great. That's going to attract a lot of people, right? To look on a person in lust is the same thing as adultery. If they leave that one out, it would make life a lot easier, right? People wouldn't have to come to pastor and confess that they were hooked on internet pornography if Jesus hadn't said that. All right? So if they left that stuff out, sorry, come on, you guys live in the internet age. You're not avoiding this stuff. It's not like you don't know it's there. You probably watch your friend.
We don't know what it is.
Oh, that doesn't mean, I'm not saying you looked at it yourself. I'm saying there's probably kids passing it around on your school bus.
There is.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. All right. Times that could be misinterpreted about Jesus. Remember, what the disciples believed and told from the earliest parts of the Bible, which are not the Gospels. The earliest parts of the Bible is the book of 1 Corinthians and Philippians. Those are the two earliest books. Okay, maybe the book of James. We're not sure. One of those three books is the earliest thing. What they were teaching, including James, who was Jesus's brother, they were teaching that Jesus was God in human flesh. Okay? But they still included things that you could misinterpret as Jesus saying he wasn't God. Places like those. You could misinterpret certain sayings of Jesus as him saying, I'm not God, don't look at me like that. So even though they believed that, they knew that because they'd interacted with him even after his resurrection and talked with him at length, they still included that stuff because it's what he actually said. They told the truth even when it made them look bad or made what they were saying harder to explain. Okay? So by all the legal standards that you would apply on we're going to look at the defense standards next time, but these are the prosecutor. These are the prosecution standards. By legal standards of intention, ability, character, consistency, bias, and cover-up. Those 6 standards, the Gospels hold up really, really well. These would be considered trustworthy evidence in a court of law. Now, the jury may still not convict, but you wouldn't discount the evidence of the witnesses, all right? So we're going to end by watching a little video.
Yay.
You're in a conversation and someone says, Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead. The resurrection story was fake. What would you say? In the modern era of science and technology, ancient claims involving supernatural, miraculous events can seem a lot more like mythology and history. When an author from antiquity writes about a miraculous experience or observation, we usually assume they're naive, mistaken, delusional, or lying. Many ancient biblical authors seem to see and experience the risen Jesus. And it's difficult to explain these varied group experiences as simultaneous delusions or coincidental errors. And maybe that's why so many skeptics think the disciples of Jesus were simply lying, telling a fake story about the resurrection. But if there's one thing I've learned as a homosexual, conspiracies of this nature, if they are to be successful, rely on key characteristics and conditions, and none of these critical attributes were present for the disciples of Jesus. So the next time someone says, the story of Jesus' resurrection was fake, here are 3 things to remember. Number 1, the story involved too many people and too much time to be fake. Successful conspiracies require the smallest possible number of co-conspirators, circulating the lie for the shortest period of time. It's a lot easier for 2 people to tell a lie and keep a secret than it is for 20. It's also a lot easier to tell a lie and keep a secret for a day than it is for a year. There were simply too many eyewitnesses of the risen Christ. Luke identifies 120 in Acts, and Paul identifies over 500 in 1 Corinthians. In addition, these witnesses faithfully communicated what they saw for nearly 60 years without flinching or changing their story. If the story of Jesus was fake, it would have been exposed easily given the number of people making the claims for nearly 6 decades. Number 2. The relationships of the disciples were too distant for the story to be fake. Successful conspiracies require excellent communication. Everyone participating in the conspiracy needs to tell the same story, and that's hard to do unless they can communicate regularly. That's why, as detectives, the first thing we do when interviewing multiple suspects is separate them. Successful conspiracies also benefit from strong familial relationships. Conspirators are far less likely to rat out fellow family members. The disciples didn't have the benefit of excellent communication or overarching family relationships. The 12 apostles, for example, were separated by thousands of miles without the ability to communicate with each other. They couldn't coordinate lies, quote unquote, or disprove a false claim that one of them might have recanted in a faraway land. While a few of the apostles were related, most were not. In Matthew, the writer of one of the earliest Gospels wasn't even liked by the other disciples when he first joined the group. If the story of Jesus was faked, it would have been easily exposed given the geographic and relational distance of the disciples. Number 3. The motives of the disciples were too weak for the story to be faked. Successful conspiracies are motivated conspiracies. Detectives learn quickly that there are only 3 reasons why anyone tells a lie: financial greed, sexual lust, and the pursuit of power. People who lie or commit any crime for that matter only do so for one of those 3 reasons. If the alleged eyewitnesses of the resurrection, all 500 plus of them, were lying, what was their motivation? None of them got rich from the lie. None collected girlfriends, and none even had the power to prevent their own martyrdom. Instead, the early eyewitnesses of the resurrection only suffered for their claims. Most were martyred. Many were persecuted. Others were ostracized. Yet they held to their claims with unwavering determination, all without any motive to lie. If the story of Jesus was fake, it would have been exposed easily once the pressure was applied against a group that had little or nothing to gain. So the next time you're sharing the truth of Christianity and someone says, Jesus wasn't actually resurrected from the dead, that story was fake, remember these 3 things. Number 1, the story involved too many people and too much time to be faked. Number 2, the relationships of the disciples were too distant for the story to be fake. And number 3, the motives of the disciples were too weak for the story to be fake. Well, what would you say? I'm Detective J. Williams.
All right. That wraps up confirmation for tonight.
That guy looks fake. That's one of those animations.
He looks like an animation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. He's actually one of the top cold case detectives in the world.
I guess he's not.
He can get convictions on. He made his reputation getting convictions in murder cases that were decades old, and they didn't think they'd ever find out who did the murder.
Interesting.
Yep. All right, Nathan.
Yes, sir.
You did very good.